was seeing his fiancée forcing the maid's toddler to wash dirty dishes. Wait, before you scroll away. I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now. Because what I'm about to tell you, it's the kind of story that stays with you. The kind that makes you rethink everything you thought you knew about people. A billionaire came home early one afternoon. Simple enough, right? Except when he walked through that front door, he froze. Completely froze. Because standing at the kitchen sink was a 3-year-old little girl. Tiny hands, barely tall enough to reach, scrubbing dirty dishes, while his fiancée stood behind her watching. What happened next? Nobody in that house was ready for. Welcome back, everyone. If you are new here, this is the place where real stories touch real hearts. And today's story is something else entirely. Before we begin, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? I genuinely love seeing where our family is watching from all around the world. What you're about to hear is an emotional, heartwarming, and deeply surprising story about power, cruelty, love, and the kind of moment that changes a man's life forever. There are twists in this story that I promise you will not see coming. So make yourself comfortable. And please do not leave early. Trust me, the ending will hit you right in the heart. Let's begin. Sometimes the most dangerous blindness is the kind that lives inside a perfect life. Ethan Cole was, by every measurable standard, a man who had everything. At 34 years old, he sat at the top of a technology empire he had built with his own hands. Cole Industries, a name that meant innovation, discipline, and relentless drive, was valued at over $4 billion. His penthouse in Manhattan overlooked the entire city. His cars were works of art. His suits were tailored. His world was organized, optimized, and polished to a shine. And yet, if you asked the people closest to Ethan what truly made him happy, they wouldn't mention the money. They would mention Lily. Lily Marchetti, 28 years old, was the kind of woman who could walk into a room and make every other detail disappear. Dark hair that fell past her shoulders. A smile that could disarm a boardroom. She was charming, educated, sophisticated. Exactly the kind of woman that Ethan's world seemed to be designed for. They had met 3 years ago at a charity gala in the Upper East Side. And from the very first conversation, Ethan had felt something shift inside him. Something he hadn't felt since his mother passed away when he was 19 years old. Something that felt dangerously close to belonging. He proposed 6 months ago on the rooftop of his penthouse. She said yes. The wedding was planned for the following spring. From the outside, it was a fairy tale. But fairy tales, as anyone who has truly lived will tell you, have a way of hiding monsters behind the prettiest doors. Ethan's personal estate in Connecticut, a sprawling property with gardens and a guest house, was where Lily had been spending most of her time while Ethan worked long hours in the city. And it was at this estate that a woman named Maria had worked as a live-in housekeeper for the past 2 years. Maria Santos was 31 years old, quiet, hardworking, the kind of person who moved through rooms like a gentle shadow, thorough, careful, always there but never intrusive. She had come to Ethan through a highly recommended staffing agency, and in 2 years, Ethan had never once had a complaint. His home was always immaculate. His instructions were always followed. And Maria always carried herself with a quiet dignity that Ethan privately respected, even if he rarely had the time to say so. What Ethan did not fully appreciate, what he had perhaps never taken the time to truly understand, was what Maria carried with her every single day she showed up to work. Her daughter, Sophia Santos, was 3 years old. Teeny, wide brown eyes that seemed to take in the entire world at once. A laugh that could soften concrete. Maria had no childcare options on certain days of the week, and Ethan, in a rare moment of uncomplicated human kindness, had told her years ago that it was fine to bring Sophia to the estate when necessary. Sophia would sit in the kitchen corner with her little backpack full of coloring books and stuffed animals, quiet as a mouse while her mother worked. She knew, in the way that very small children somehow understand more than adults give them credit for, that this was her mother's workplace and she needed to be good. And she always was. Ethan had seen Sophia only a handful of times. Small wave here. Shy smile there. He had once brought her a cookie from a bakery bag he was carrying, and she had held it with both hands and said, "Thank you, mister," so seriously that he had laughed for the first time in weeks. He had thought nothing more of it. He should have paid closer attention. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to realize you had never truly seen them at all? Hold that thought, because Ethan Cole was about to learn exactly what that feels like. That Tuesday in October, Ethan left his Manhattan office 3 hours earlier than planned. A meeting had been cancelled. A headache had been building behind his eyes since morning. All he wanted was the quiet of the Connecticut house, a glass of water, and maybe an early night. He didn't call ahead. He never called ahead when he came home. It was his house. There was no reason to. He pulled through the iron gates at 2:47 in the afternoon, parked his car in the circular drive, and let himself in through the front door. The house was quiet. Lily's car was in the garage. Maria must have been working somewhere in the house. Everything seemed completely normal. And then he heard it. A sound coming from the kitchen. A small, tired, confused sound. The sound of a child. Trying very hard not to cry. What a man discovers in his own home can either break him or wake him up completely. Ethan walked toward the kitchen slowly. Not because he was cautious. He didn't yet have any reason to be. He walked slowly because the sound confused him. It was so small, so strained. And underneath it, there was another sound. Voice. Lily's voice. Low. Dark. The tone she used on phone calls with vendors who disappointed her. The tone that always made Ethan slightly uncomfortable, but which he had told himself was just her being direct. He stopped just outside the kitchen doorway. What he saw in the next 3 seconds rearranged something fundamental inside him. Sophia, 3 years old, barely tall enough to see over the edge of the sink, was standing on a small step stool, her tiny sleeves pushed up to her elbows, her little hands submerged in a sink full of dirty dishwater. Plate. Glasses. The remnants of what looked like a lunch gathering. A sink full of work that would challenge an adult. And Sophia was trying. Scrubbing with a sponge that was nearly as big as her head. Her arms shaking slightly with the effort. Her lower lip trembling. Tears running silently down her cheeks. But she wasn't stopping. Because standing 3 feet behind her, arms crossed, was Lily. "Keep going," Lily said, her voice carrying that same low, clipped authority. "You're not done. Don't stop." Ethan could not move. "But it's heavy," Sophia whispered. Her voice was barely audible. The voice of a child who has learned that complaining makes things worse. "I don't care," Lily said flatly. "Your mother is busy with the laundry. You want to eat in this house, you contribute. Keep washing." Ethan stood in that doorway for what felt like an eternity but was probably 5 seconds. 5 seconds that dismantled 3 years of a carefully constructed image. He stepped into the kitchen. Lily heard him and turned. And in the half-second before her expression rearranged itself into something softer, Ethan saw it. The flicker of someone who had been caught. Not surprise exactly. Something more calculated than surprise. The micro-adjustment of a person shifting from one version of themselves to another. "Ethan," she started, her voice already warming, already becoming the Lily he knew. "You're home early, I didn't." "Sophia." Ethan's voice came out quiet. "Careful." He walked to the sink and gently lifted Sophia off the step stool. The little girl's wet hands gripped his jacket sleeve instinctively. She looked up at him with those enormous brown eyes, tears still fresh on her cheeks, and for a brief second she looked uncertain, as though she wasn't sure if she was in more trouble now. "You're okay," he said softly. He grabbed a clean dish towel from the counter and gently dried her hands. "You're okay." He set her down, reached into his jacket pocket out of pure reflex, and found a foil-wrapped piece of chocolate from a meeting earlier that day. He held it out to her. She looked at it, looked at him, then took it with both hands, exactly the way she had taken that cookie months ago, and whispered, "Thank you, mister." Ethan straightened up and turned to face Lily. The warmth he had briefly manufactured in his expression was gone. "Explain this to me," he said. Not loudly, not aggressively, just very, very clearly. And here is where the story gets complicated. Because what Lily said next was so smooth, so immediately constructed, so practiced sounding, that Ethan realized with a cold, sinking feeling that this was probably not the first time. Do you think Ethan should have seen the signs earlier? Honestly, think about the people in your own life. How often do we miss what's right in front of us because we love someone? Keep watching because this story is about to go somewhere you will not expect. Lily tilted her head slightly. "I was just teaching her responsibility," she said, her voice gentle, almost concerned sounding. "Maria spoils her. She lets her sit around all day doing nothing. I was trying to help." The word help landed in the room like something foreign. Ethan looked at the sink, at the pile of dishes, the step stool, at Sophia, who had retreated to the kitchen corner and was sitting with her knees pulled to her chest, quietly unwrapping the chocolate with intense concentration, as though the rest of the room didn't exist. She had learned to make herself small. 3 years old, and she had already learned to make herself small. Something in Ethan's chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with his headache. He didn't argue with Lily right then. He didn't raise his voice. He simply nodded, said, "I see," and walked out of the kitchen. But his mind was already moving. He needed to find Maria. And he needed to know how long this had really been going on. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives in a whisper. From someone who was never supposed to speak at all. Ethan found Maria in the laundry room at the back of the house. She was folding linens with the mechanical efficiency of someone deep in practiced routine. Her back to the door. She didn't hear him come in. He watched her for a moment. Her movements were slightly too controlled, too careful. The body language of someone managing attention they were trying not to show. "Maria," he turned. And what Ethan saw on her face before she could rearrange, it was not what he expected. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't the nervous expression of an employee caught taking a break. It was fear. Quickly masked. Professionally subdued. But fear, unmistakably. For just 1 second before her expression settled into polite attentiveness. "Mr. Cole," she said. "I'm sorry, I didn't hear you come in." "It's fine," he said. He stepped into the laundry room and closed the door gently behind him. "I need to ask you something. And I need you to be completely honest with me. You will not be in any trouble for what you tell me. I promise you that." Maria's hands went still on the sheet she was folding. Long pause. "How long," Ethan said carefully, "has Sophia been used to do household tasks?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Maria," he said gently. "I saw her at the sink." Something broke quietly behind Maria's eyes. Not dramatically. Not with tears, she was too composed for that. Just a small, tired crumbling of the wall she had been maintaining. The wall that said everything is fine. The wall that said I can handle this. The wall that every working mother builds out of pure necessity. "Since Miss Lily moved in more permanently," Maria said. Her voice was even, controlled, but the words cost her something. At first it was small things. She told Sophia to pick up toys in the hallway, or carry small items. "I thought it was just a preference. I didn't want to cause problems." A pause. Then it became more. Setting the table, carrying laundry, and this week, the dishes. Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Why didn't you come to me?" Maria looked at him directly then. And in her eyes there was something that wasn't accusation but was honest enough that it stung. "Because Miss Lily told me," she said quietly, "that if I complained to you about anything she did in this house, she would tell you that I had been stealing. She said she had already moved some items to prepare the story if she needed it. Beep. I have no money for a lawyer, Mr. Cole. Have no family here. Sophia is all I have. I couldn't risk it." The laundry room was completely silent. Outside, through the small frosted window, the Connecticut afternoon was gray and still. Ethan stood there with the weight of what had just been said settling over him like something physical. A 3-year-old girl standing on a step stool, crying silently, washing dishes. Because a 28-year-old woman, a woman who wore designer clothes and attended charity events and talked about kindness at dinner parties, had decided that the child of a maid was an acceptable person to belittle, to use, and to threaten. And she had done it in his house, under his roof, with his name on the front gate. What would you do if you were standing in Ethan's shoes right now? What would you do with the anger, the guilt, the heartbreak, all arriving at exactly the same moment? Tell me. Surprised even the people who thought they knew him best. He didn't go back to the kitchen immediately. He went to his home office, sat down, and made 3 phone calls. The first was to his personal attorney. The second was to the estate security system manager, because every room in that house, per insurance requirements, had camera coverage in common areas, including the kitchen. And the third call, the quietest one, the one made in a voice so low that Maria, still in the laundry room down the hall, couldn't have heard it even if she tried, was to Lily's mother. The moment a man stops being fooled is also the moment he finds out what he is actually made of. By the time Ethan walked back into the main living room that evening, he had watched 47 minutes of security footage. He sat alone in his office with the door closed and he watched his home, the home he had worked his entire adult life to build, become something he didn't recognize. It wasn't just that day. The cameras showed him 2 months of afternoons. Lily speaking to Maria in a tone that never appeared when Ethan was home. Sophia being directed to carry things, clean things, retrieve things. Small cruelties stacked like bricks. On one recording, Lily had made Sophia stand in the corner of the kitchen for 20 minutes because she had accidentally knocked over a glass of water, at 3 years old, and had been, in Lily's words, clumsy and careless. 20 minutes in the corner. For spilling water. 3 years old. Ethan pressed his palms flat against the desk and breathed carefully. He had fallen in love with a performance. An exquisitely crafted 3-year-long performance. And the cruelest part, the detail that would stay with him longest, was that the person who had paid the highest price for that performance wasn't him. It was a little girl who had done absolutely nothing wrong. He called his attorney back. By the following morning, 3 things would be set in motion. First, an immediate and fully documented legal release of Lily from all financial agreements tied to the engagement. Second, a formal security and HR report that would protect Maria from any future false accusations, the camera footage making any fabricated theft claim legally impossible. And third, and this was the part that Ethan had sat quietly with for a long time before deciding, a significant and privately structured financial arrangement for Maria. Not charity, not pity, a reallocation. The engagement had come with a substantial prenuptial gift that Ethan had planned for Lily. That money now would go somewhere else, somewhere more honest. But before any of that happened, before lawyers and documents and the quiet machinery of consequence, Ethan walked back out to the living room where Lily was sitting with a glass of wine, her phone in one hand, looking for all the world like a woman completely at ease in the life she had built for herself. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. That smile. He sat across from her. "I watched the footage," he said. The smile didn't disappear immediately. It faded slowly, the way a stage light dims when someone turns the dial. And what replaced it was not shame. That was the part that told him everything he needed to know. It wasn't shame. It was calculation. Ethan, I can explain. You threatened Maria's job, he said calmly. You used her child as domestic help. You put a 3-year-old in the corner for spilling water. He paused. I have all of it on camera. Lily set her wine glass down very carefully. You have to understand, she started, her voice shifting now into something that almost resembled vulnerability. Almost. That woman lets that child run wild in a professional environment. I was trying to maintain standards. She is 3 years old, Ethan said. Just that. Just those 4 words. Quiet as stones. The room was silent for a very long time. I think you should stay somewhere else tonight, Ethan said finally. My attorney will be in touch about the engagement agreements. You'll receive what is legally owed to you and nothing more. Lily stared at him. And for one brief, unguarded moment, the performance fell away entirely, and Ethan saw something in her face that was raw and unflattering and real. And then she stood, smoothed her jacket, picked up her bag and walked to the door. She did not say sorry. Not to Ethan. Not to Maria. Not to Sophia. And that silence said more than any confession ever could. The most unexpected healings happen in the quietest moments, not in grand gestures, but in the simple act of being seen. 3 weeks passed. The Connecticut estate settled back into itself the way a house does when the tension finally lifts. Slowly, room by room, like windows being opened after a long winter. Maria continued working, at first with a watchfulness that broke Ethan's heart quietly every morning, a flinch readiness that told him exactly how thoroughly the previous months had worn her down. But as the days went by and nothing changed except everything being simpler, something in her posture gradually softened. Sophia came with her on Tuesdays and Thursdays, as she always had. But something was different now. Ethan started coming home earlier. Not because his schedule had lightened, it hadn't, but because he found, to his own quiet surprise, that he wanted to. He would find Sophia in her corner with her coloring books, and instead of walking past, he started stopping, asking what she was drawing. Sitting on the kitchen floor in his work slacks, tie loosened, looking at crayon illustrations that Sophia narrated with extraordinary seriousness. That's a dog, she told him one afternoon, pointing to a purple oval with 4 lines and a circle on top. A very good dog, Ethan said. His name is Biscuit, she added. That's an excellent name. She looked at him to check whether he was making fun of her, determined that he wasn't, and went back to coloring. These were small moments, ordinary moments, the kind that don't make headlines and don't belong in highlight reels. They were the best moments Ethan had experienced in years. Maria noticed. She didn't say anything at first. She was too careful, still too cautious. But one afternoon, she put a cup of coffee on the kitchen table near where Ethan was reviewing contracts, and said quietly, without preamble, "She asks about you on the days she doesn't come." Ethan looked up. "She calls you the Mister with the chocolate," Maria added, and there was the ghost of a smile on her face. Ethan laughed. Real one. The kind that surprised him. "She's a remarkable kid," he said. Maria's expression shifted into something deeper then. Something a mother wears when someone sees her child truly. "She is," she said softly. "She's the best thing I've ever done." The legal arrangements had been finalized quietly and efficiently. The financial structure Ethan had set up for Maria was significant, enough to fully fund Sophia's education from preschool through college, with additional security for Maria's housing and future. It had been presented through the attorney with minimal fanfare, because Ethan understood intuitively that making a ceremony of it would embarrass Maria in ways she didn't deserve. Maria had cried. She'd apologized for crying, which made Ethan tell her firmly to please stop apologizing. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said. "Not one single thing." She had nodded, composed herself, straightened her shoulders, and gone back to work. "Now here is what I want you to really sit with as this story comes to its close." In the months that followed, Ethan went through what he would later describe to a close friend as the most educational year of his life. He rebuilt his understanding of his own home, who was in it, what they carried, what they deserved. He became, with Sophia's help and without ever quite planning to, a person who paid attention to the quiet people in rooms, the ones who made things run without being thanked, the ones who showed up and kept showing up regardless. He never rushed into another relationship. He learned slowly to notice the difference between someone who was kind when it mattered and someone who was kind only when they had an audience. That difference, he came to understand, was everything. As for Sophia, she turned 4 in February. Ethan showed up at Maria's apartment that Saturday with a purple stuffed dog from a toy store on 5th Avenue. Sophia opened the door in a birthday crown made of paper and stared at the dog for a full 3 seconds before looking up at Ethan with those wide brown eyes. "Is that Biscuit?" she asked. "It is," he said. She took the dog with both hands, the way she always took gifts, with absolute seriousness, and then did something she had never done before. She hugged him, small arms around his knees, the top of her head barely reaching his waist. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Then she turned and ran back into the apartment, the purple dog clutched to her chest, shouting something at Maria in Spanish that made Maria laugh with her whole face. Ethan stood in the doorway for a moment and thought that of all the things he had built, the companies, the buildings, the portfolios, the $4 billion empire, nothing had ever made him feel quite as wealthy as this. This story is about more than one man's mistake and one woman's cruelty. It's about something deeper. It's about the small people in our lives, the ones we walk past, the ones who carry heavy loads quietly, the ones we've never stopped to really see. A 3-year-old girl was treated like she was invisible, like she didn't matter, like her value was defined by her mother's job title and the address she lived in. And a billionaire, in the moment he finally opened his eyes, chose dignity over comfort and truth over convenience. Here is the lesson. It doesn't cost anything, not a single dollar, to treat a person like they matter. Not a child, not a housekeeper, not the janitor, the cashier, the delivery driver, the intern. Every single person you encounter is carrying something you cannot see. Be the person who makes the load a little lighter. Not for praise, not for reward, just because it's right. If this story moved you, if any part of it stayed with you, please hit that like button right now. It helps more people find stories like this one. And honestly, the world could use do it. We put our whole hearts into every single to hear from you. What was the moment in this story that hit you hardest? Was it Sophia at the sink, the security footage, or that birthday hug at the door? To hear it today. Someone who needs a reminder that kindness still exists in this world. 'Cause it does. It always has. You just have to be brave enough to